electric grid is strong, and again, a grid that provides affordable and reliable electricity to the people of Puerto Rico. As I've said before, I support an all of the above energy approach, but it has to be an energy approach that works and delivers. Uh, we need to work for affordable and reliable energy that meets the needs of local communities. We will continue working for that and assisting in any way that we can. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Thank you. And let me recognize myself. I want to begin by thanking my colleagues for taking the time to join us for this full committee oversight hearing on Puerto Rico's post-disaster reconstruction and power grid development. In the last 5 years, Puerto Rico has been impacted by one major natural disaster after another. And the litany is there, and everybody is aware of them, the latest being September 2022. Just this morning, a magnitude 5 earthquake struck the island. The territory's structural issues, including fragile infrastructure and some of the nation's highest poverty rates, make Puerto Rico extremely vulnerable to the compounding effects of climate change, especially the increase in the frequency and the intensity of hurricanes and storms. The purpose of today's hearing is to receive testimony from key stakeholders regarding post-disaster reconstruction efforts in Puerto Rico. We will also discuss a legislative proposal designed to provide life-saving post-disaster energy resources to those least able to access them. We will hear from local government officials, the electric utility private operator, local nonprofit and community leaders, and professional associations. Although FEMA's administrator was unable to join us today, I want to thank the Biden administration for its rapid and bold actions to ensure Puerto Rico has the resources it needs to recover from Hurricane Fiona and previous national disasters. After Hurricane Irma and Maria impacted Puerto Rico, Congress appropriated disaster aid for the territory, but the reconstruction process has moved slowly, very slowly. For almost 3 years, the previous administration withheld billions of dollars for critical projects on the island. Further, although FEMA provided significant support to Puerto Rico, the agency's response was hindered by its adherence to protocols that failed to account for Puerto Rico's structural issues, including the territory's financial situation. The government of Puerto Rico has been criticized for its inability to apply dispersed funds in a timely manner toward critical projects, community organizations, and small businesses. In June 2021, operational control of Puerto Rico's energy grid was transferred from Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, PREPA, to private operator Luma Energy, which was tasked with rebuilding the grid and improving service. Since then, Puerto Rico has not seen an improvement in the frequency of outages, but problematically has seen an increase in their duration. The local government must conduct aggressive oversight of Luma's contract to operate, maintain, and modernize the electric grid. Additional accountability is necessary. The residents of Puerto Rico deserve a reliable electric service. To increase resilience on the island, the government of Puerto Rico makes significant infrastructure investments. This includes prioritizing projects to modernize the electric grid toward a more reliable systems for residents that is decentralized and less reliant on fossil fuels. But Puerto Rico doesn't have the funding to go it alone, and the federal disaster funds that have been appropriated so far cannot provide the resiliency that Puerto Rico's most vulnerable populations need. I'm seeking to include in a post-Hurricane Fiona an emergency supplement of $5 billion for the Department of Energy to provide rooftop solar and battery storage systems for low-income households and households with people with disabilities in Puerto Rico. I want to thank Secretary Jennifer Granholm for supporting the proposal, and amidst the island-wide blackout caused by Hurricane Fiona, pockets of solar power generation were able to keep the lights on. A preliminary study from the National Lab of Renewable Energy PR 100 program found that Puerto Rico's high exposure to sunlight could produce over 4 times the amount of energy that it needs for rooftop solar power. Now I want to welcome all our witnesses. Thank you for joining us today. We welcome your insight and recommendations. And Now I will turn to the witness. Before, let me remind all the witnesses and my colleagues on the dais that the 5-minute rule will be more aggressively monitored and by myself. We have a lot of witnesses, and it's a voting day, and people. I've heard from members that have made plans to leave and go back to their districts and their homes, and so in order to maintain as much participation by members, I would hope that everybody strictly takes to that 5-minute rule, and I will remind members as we go forward. And now let me introduce the witness. Let me begin by introducing distinguished Governor of Puerto Rico, the Honorable Pedro Pellegrusi. Sir, thank you so much for the time to be here, and you'll recognize, sir, for 5 minutes.
Chairman Grijalva, Ranking Member Westerman, Resident Commissioner Gonzalez Colon, and members of the committee. Thank you for holding this hearing about the recovery of Puerto Rico. I am pleased to report that Puerto Rico is emerging from a challenging period with strength and optimism into a new era of stability, evidenced by the island's economic upswing. As our economy recovers, we're working to ensure that Puerto Rico's energy system is reliable and resilient, speeding up our reconstruction and seeking fair treatment in Medicaid and Medicare, as well as inclusion in the SNAP program. Puerto Rico, Congress, and the Biden administration have committed significant resources to the island's recovery after the 2017 hurricanes, the subsequent earthquakes, the pandemic, and the most recent Hurricane Fiona. As of today, 70% of the CDBG-DR disaster funds have been obligated. Out of over 12,000 eligible families, more than 6,400 families have had their homes rebuilt or received housing vouchers. In addition, over 2,300 residences are under construction or pre-construction. FEMA has obligated over 91% of the funding allocated for emergency and permanent work projects, and almost 20% has already been disbursed. We now have 2,132 projects under construction for a total cost of $800 million, and over 1,600 projects totaling over $1.4 billion are in the permitting process and should start construction soon. The transformation of our electric system is one of our highest priorities. We're committed to moving away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy and converting our fragile and integrated electric grid into a modern, resilient, and interdependent one that can serve Puerto Rican residents and businesses without blackouts. The grid reconstruction is underway, with multiple substations repaired, thousands of poles and streetlights replaced, and over 33,000 new solar customers connected. Also, 90 energy projects are in the design phase, 43 are awaiting FEMA approval, 51 have been approved, and 40 projects are under construction. Furthermore, 1,000 megawatt in utility-scale renewable energy generation projects, including 200 megawatt battery storage, are in design or construction, and we're about to finish an RFP process for additional renewable energy projects that will generate 1,000 megawatts, along with 500 megawatts in battery storage. In addition, we're installing solar and battery systems on all homes rebuilt under our R3 program and have allocated $500 million of CDBG mid-funding for assisting low-income households in acquiring solar panels and batteries. Moreover, work has begun to deploy $1.3 billion in CDBG DR funds for microgrids and energy storage systems in remote communities and first response agencies. However, given Hurricane Fiona's recent impact on Puerto Rico, our electric system has suffered additional damages. After I requested emergency assistance to stabilize our power system, FEMA agreed to provide resources to assist Puerto Rico in increasing its power generation capacity and improving our transmission and distribution of energy. The plan proposes to install temporary generation through power barges and high-capacity portable generators, and to perform short-term repair work in our existing generation plants and electric grid. This will allow Puerto Rico to concentrate all efforts on advancing the transformation and modernization of its electric system while our people have stable service. Our asks to this committee and Congress include providing 100% federal share match for energy-related FEMA-funded projects, giving congressional authorization to FEMA to adjust fixed cost estimates of approved projects given the recent increase in the cost of construction materials and supply chain disruptions, amending the Stafford Act to authorize FEMA to consolidate disasters into a single award of federal assistance, and supporting the proposal of Chairman Grijalva and other members of Congress to allocate $5 billion in directed CDBG-DR funding for residential solar energy systems on the island. Finally, I must remind this Congress that even after the successful restructuring of our public debt and rebuilding of our infrastructure, Puerto Rico will remain hindered until our century-long status question is resolved. The people of Puerto Rico voted and chose statehood as their path forward. Congress should call for a vote on the political future of Puerto Rico and commit to implementing the will of the majority. After all, that is what democracy is all about. I thank you for favorably reporting H.R. 8393 out of this committee and urge Congress to approve it. Thank you.
I'm going to pass on myself at this point and ask the ranking member if he has any questions for the governor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, Governor, for being here and for your testimony. We know that both electricity generation and transmission distribution were affected by Hurricane Fiona. The winds and rain knocked down power lines, substations were flooded, and supply lines were interrupted, as we noted in the visit that you led us on with the resident commissioner when we were in Puerto Rico. So based on the information that you have, was the power loss primarily the result of downed power lines or lack of electricity generation, or some combination of the two? Where would you say the most emphasis needs to be placed?
It's a combination of the two. Actually, LUMA has estimated that the damage could to the transmission and distribution grid could amount to up to $4 billion, but at a minimum, it'll be $2 to $3 billion worth of repairs that need to be done. You're talking about mostly lines failing, falling, poles falling that need to be replaced, switches, breakers, transformers damaged, among other damage. In the case of generation, some of the generating units suffered damage because of all the excess humidity that they were exposed to. And even there, I understand the amount of the damage, or the extent of the damage, doesn't involve or reach the number that LUMA estimated for the repair of the transmission and distribution grid, but it is substantial. FEMA, at my request, came to Puerto Rico after Fiona and made an assessment along with DOE, Corps of Engineers, EPA. They visited 35 facilities, generation facilities, substations, critical substations, and they confirmed, and I saw this about 2 weeks ago, they gave me an informal report with pictures and everything, the damage that had taken place. And FEMA has agreed to come in and assist us in increasing our power generation for a period of time which could range between 1 year and 1.5 years.
So thinking
why this is important, because we are right now, because of units failing, generation units damaged, we are barely supplying the demand that our people, our constituents have. And we cannot repair the units or give them even regular maintenance as they should.
Now,
So,
are you talking about the oil-fired units? Those
I am
generating-
talking about all of them. FEMA has already agreed to make repairs in the Aguirre plant we flew over,
Mhm.
which is a bunker diesel oil plant. Costa Sur plant, which is mostly or should be an LNG plant. The San Juan plant and the Palo Seco plant, which again are, in the case of Palo Seco, a bunker C oil burning plant. San Juan, it's a combination.
I'm gonna have to move on,
Yeah.
Governor, but you brought out a lot of points I would like to discuss more, but I know we talked about LNG exports, and I think you said you've got 2 places where you can import or bring ships in with LNG, but because of the Jones Act and because we don't have LNG flagged U.S. vessels, you're having to buy that gas from, I think, Sierra Leone, or maybe you told me it's another country.
It is mostly Trinidad and Tobago, but
Trinidad and
it can come as far from what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Sierra Leone.
Where we could be using domestic produced gas coming out of the Gulf, but also, when we look at having an electric system that's more affordable, more reliable, and that is cleaner than the bunker oil. I know there's been a lot of emphasis on offshore wind, on solar, but to give that real baseload power, it seems like there would be more of an emphasis on building gas plants and figuring out how to get domestic gas there from the Gulf of Mexico that we know provides very clean, very reliable, and very affordable power when we were rebuilding this system. So we need to have a lot more discussion about that, but
let
there's
me quickly
3
respond because it's something that you should know with all respect. The Energy Bureau of Puerto Rico just authorized a request for proposals process to have in Puerto Rico a 300 mega LNG plant, privately financed. It has entrusted the P3 authority to handle that RFP process, request for proposals. And I envision that process will start at some point early next year. So we will be seeking a private LNG plant at that level, 300 mega, which is
Okay,
significant.
thank you very much.
So for your knowledge.
Thank you, sir. Hate to interrupt you, but this hard and fast rule is already being broken as we speak. Recognize my colleague from Arizona, Mr. Gallo. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Governor Pierluisi. Thank you for being here today. We're all eager to continue the conversation about Puerto Rico's resilience and disaster reconstruction, and I'm proud to have worked closely with you on this issue during my recent visit to the island in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Fiona. Being present on the ground and seeing the situation firsthand is an important step in understanding how we can be most helpful moving forward. It's also important to note that the continued question of Puerto Rico's status has hindered federal assistance programs for years and will continue to do so until it is resolved. So passing the Puerto Rican Status Act out of this committee was a big step in the right direction, and we should all work together to keep that momentum going and bring it to the floor. I have a couple questions. Number one, Hurricane Fiona was only the latest in a series of hurricanes and natural disasters impacting Puerto Rico in recent years. What changes did the government of Puerto Rico make to improve disaster response after Hurricane Maria? And do you believe those changes improved the response to Hurricane Fiona?
Well, the FEMA administrator is the one that has praised us, actually, because of our response to Fiona. Deanne Criswell has said that the coordination she saw in Puerto Rico between our first responders and FEMA can be used as a model for the rest of the nation. She also said that, for example, they have warehouses with supplies in Puerto Rico, 4 of them now. In Maria, they only had, I'm talking about FEMA, 1 warehouse. They were much better stocked to help our people. The way FEMA works is they step in if our local agencies, municipalities are not able to supply the needs of our people, and coordinate NGOs who are always assisting. They didn't have to use much, if at all, of those supplies because we were taking care of our people. The area where I have to admit that there's still a lot of room for improvement is power. power in Puerto Rico because actually, when a hurricane happens, there's a blackout. That's to be expected anywhere. There was a huge blackout in Florida just recently. But the question is, how soon can you restore power, which is an essential service? In Puerto Rico, basically, it took Luma and Prepa about 2 weeks to restore 50% of the power. 1 week, roughly, a little bit more of the 1 week to restore 50% of our power generation. 2 weeks, 75%. 3 weeks, about 95%. 100% by about a month. So that to me is too long. And the reason is we have an integrated system which causes that that when there's any major disruption, the system shuts down to protect itself. We don't have what's called in the energy field black start units, which means that our plants cannot restart unless they have battery systems allowing them to do so without being connected to the grid. It sounds nonsensical. You need the plants that are the ones generating power need power. And a lot of our old plants don't have those systems. That's part of the work that we will be doing in the near future. So we need to improve our energy system so we don't have this power disruption for so long after a major disaster.
And on that
we
subject,
will always be exposed to major
and on that
disasters.
subject, we have a minute 15. I don't want to get gavelled down. What is the plan in regards to microgrids and distributed energy that you are putting together to meet your renewable energy goal of 100% by 2025? How is that looking?
Okay, lots of things are ongoing. I mentioned quickly that we are devoting $1.3 billion of CDBG DR funding for microgrids, distributed energy initiatives in remote communities in Puerto Rico and in critical public facilities. The first one that we will be installing takes care of Centro Médico, our major medical center. There will be a grid for that because it is a critical facility, but an RFP process will be outstanding in early 2020, in January actually of 2023. So it's about to happen. We are also devoting $500 million of CDBG MID funding for incentivizing low-income households to have solar panels and batteries at home. We expect to reach roughly 25,000 households doing that, basically assuming the cost of those solar systems for them, among other initiatives that we're doing.
Okay, thank you, Governor.
Mr. Lombard,
3 seconds.
you're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In a moment, I'm going to yield the remainder of my time to the excellent resident commissioner to Congress from Puerto Rico, Ms. Jennifer Gonzalez Colon. Her dedication to the island is legendary. First, I have a few brief comments. Governor Pierluisi, I enjoyed serving with you when you were a resident commissioner to Congress, and I also enjoyed meeting with you in your office recently on a visit I made to the island. So it's good to see you again.
Thank you for visiting.
The federal government has made fixing the energy grids of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands a top priority since Hurricanes Maria and Irma, yet the government-run utilities, PREPA and Virgin Islands, WAPA, remain mired in debt and mismanagement. WAPA owes more than $150 million for building an LPG terminal, and PREPA owes $300 million for work performed to restore power immediately after the hurricanes. And despite actions by this committee, PREPA is still in bankruptcy. It is time for the islands to pay their debts. And with that, I would yield the balance of my time to the gentlelady from Puerto Rico.
Thank you, and thank you, my dear friend, for yielding the time and visiting the island and being always available for the issues regarding Puerto Rico. Good morning, Governor.
morning.
I understand that the biggest challenge Puerto Rico is facing is the unstable condition of the grid and the generation plants, and we all know that back home. Congress has provided Puerto Rico, and FEMA has allocated funds for this purpose. And in addition, Puerto Rico has also received CDBG-DR funds for the grid enhancement. And I'm concerned that a lot of this funding is being obligated but not dispersed. Can you explain what you're doing just to get that money out of the federal agencies?
I'll try to be brief, but give.
Thank you,
the-
because I got another question.
Okay, then I'll be brief. For about 3 years, the spending that happened in Puerto Rico was emergency spending by FEMA. For 3 years, even the HUD hadn't even authorized us to use much of the CDBG DR funding that you referred to. In late 2020 was when basically FEMA allowed us to access the $9.5 billion that we have for the electric grid and our generation system. And in May of 2021 was when FEMA changed its bureaucratic procedures to expedite the access to this funding. Since then, FEMA has been working closely with us. It has streamlined its environmental historic preservation review, and now the projects are moving forward. And I mentioned the number. It's roughly, we now have 40 projects under construction. In addition, FEMA has allowed us to, has given us access or in advance, has allowed us to get 50% of the cost of the projects in advance, so that recipients that didn't have the cash flow to start the projects can have an advance of 25% of the cost of the project. And as soon as they spend that in accordance with requirements, then 25% more. That's a game changer. So that's new. And in the case of CDBG DR, by the beginning of 2021, only $100 million had been spent of CDBG DR funding. Now we're up to $1.3 billion. And the Secretary of Housing will explain to you, to the members of this committee, all the initiatives that are ongoing and the traction that we're getting. The momentum is there. I envision a very busy 2023 with thousands of construction projects on the way.
Governor, you said as well that you're requesting that in Congress we amend the Stafford Act to authorize FEMA to consolidate Hurricanes Irma, Maria, and Hurricane Fiona disasters into a single award for the administration of federal assistance. So that brings me the issue of, why we need such amendment. Is this amendment going to be lessen the administrative burdens that you are already talking that FEMA is working with
Yes.
you hand by hand?
That's another measure to streamline bureaucratic requirements. Managing two disasters at the same time, Maria and Irma, along with Fiona, which caused damage in some of the projects that we were working on for Maria-related damages, it is nightmarish. It just makes the life of the FEMA personnel and our core 3 personnel, our counterpart in Puerto Rico, much harder. So that's why we're requesting a consolidation, which has been done elsewhere in the States.
I yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman yields. Let me now ask, going down the dais, Mr. Soto, do you have any questions? You're recognized, sir.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Governor, welcome back to the Natural Resource Committee, and thanks for always being so accessible. We know Puerto Rico has faced many challenges: Hurricane Maria, which we both saw together, Hurricane Fiona, which thank you for hosting us down there, and appreciate your strong response to Hurricane Fiona. We saw flooding, particularly in the south, and so we take your comments very seriously about the need to adjust the FEMA funding to recognize that Hurricane Fiona has exacerbated some of these problems, but thank God and for the strong response that we are seeing the island quickly recover from that. The disaster relief funding is there. That's the positive news, right? We just, and we're finally seeing it to start flowing. So I was really excited to hear that 70% of the FEMA disaster relief funds have been obligated, and how critical that's going to be. First question has to deal with LUMA and with power. We know you inherited a LUMA contract, and you're doing your best to manage Puerto Rico's energy distribution with them, and making sure that we can improve the grid. Why do you think the contract and the extension by Luma is vital for keeping Puerto Rico on the path to a more resilient future? And what would be the consequences of canceling the Luma contract if that were to happen?
Well, the first thing that I have to say is that there's an energy transformation law in Puerto Rico, which was approved on a bipartisan basis in 2018. It's law 120, which is the one that says we cannot continue doing more of the same, relying on a state-owned monopoly. We need to do public-private partnerships for both transmission and distribution and generation, and actually split the two so that there's no monopoly in Puerto Rico. Luma was awarded this contract after a very detailed and exhaustive P3 process. The Attorney General of Puerto Rico just issued a comprehensive opinion explaining every step that was taken before that contract happened. And actually, I knew that it was the proper procedure for procurement for the contract, and also knew that the contract had no invalid or legally invalid clauses and so on. I actually knew it. I understood it. But it is great that the head of the P3 authority requested this opinion from the Attorney General, and I welcome all of you to read that opinion because it explains the process, it explains the contract in plain vanilla, and it validates it the same way that a federal judge, Judge Taylor Swain, in the PREPA bankruptcy process has so far validated it as well. A lot is said out there, but I have to say that first. Secondly, canceling that contract to me, is a nightmare. We have 1.5 billion people in our electric system, being served by electric system. Changing Luma from one day to the next, even transitioning Luma out for a year or a year and a half, would disrupt the service that we're getting and would delay the transformation that you're following up on and the reconstruction that you're following up on. Because our law would require that I start a new P3 process to substitute Luma. So that's, to me, out of the question.
Thank
Now,
you, Governor.
Luma, come December 1st, would have two options, roughly, as I see it. Continue rendering its services under the 15-year contract that was entered into. That's one option, waiving some conditions that are set in that contract. Or continuing to render its services under a supplemental agreement that was entered into because of the bankruptcy process until the bankruptcy process ends. It's as simple as that. And that will be announced, either course at some point before December 1st. But again, nobody should expect that I will allow, if I can help it, for a major disruption of our system, just because some people didn't like the P3 process that happened before I assumed office and don't like the contract that was entered into, and that it is the law in Puerto Rico.
Well, thank you, Governor. We know that you'll continue to press to hold them accountable and make sure we can continue to get Puerto Rico's electrical grid back to reliability with a boost in renewable energy. And I yield back.
Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And look, I'm fully aware that the purpose of this hearing is to deal with the post-disaster reconstruction and the power grid development. But the reality is every time we have a hearing here on Puerto Rico, it's one of two things, and this is happening here again today. It is coming here with hands out, asking for more money and or asking for statehood. That's what we ever deal with in here. And it's no secret, I oppose statehood for Puerto Rico, and I'm certainly not alone in that position. It's also no secret that many people in Puerto Rico want statehood. But there are many compelling facts and arguments that need to be considered. And the bill that this committee forced through, HR 1522, had intrinsic flaws in it. The bill did not allow, for example, Puerto Rico to remain a territory. Well, it's critical that pieces of legislation allow for all possible options. And that's a pretty significant one that was absolutely left out. The bill did not, it had questionable rules that would have forced the people of Puerto Rico to put laws into their constitution that they had not agreed to. The bill also did absolutely nothing to solve the debt crisis that they've been facing. And they, had they voted to be independent, would have made things even worse for the new country financially. And what disturbs me probably more than anything is that this committee rammed that piece of legislation through the process through a markup hearing without even having hearings on the legislation itself. That is unacceptable. When you're dealing with something like statehood, that should be well thought out. It is a meticulous process. It is not something to be rammed through, nor is it something to be dealt with without any serious thought and just a markup hearing. Just say, okay, well, let's vote on this. Let's move with it. It's absolutely not the way to deal with it. But that's the common way that this committee has dealt with this issue in Puerto Rico. And quite frankly, the Puerto Rican Commonwealth has been suffering for quite some time with issues that have majorly impacted the residents thereof in negative ways and have halted their future progress. I was here in 2016 when PROMESA was passed, and the Puerto Rico Oversight Management Economic Stability Act. I was here. Some others were here at that time as well. And here we are. I mean, 6 years later, Puerto Rico still does not have a balanced budget. Now, listen, there has been progress made, and I'm not going to imply otherwise. I know there's been some progress made, but we are not even close to having a serious discussion about statehood. There are so many issues, and here we've been playing games with the issue, just trying to make it happen without any even serious hearings. The government must take responsibility and fix the major issues that are facing Puerto Rico before we even begin any serious discussion here about statehood. And this committee right here should be holding more hearings about the statehood, the status of PROMESA. I don't even remember, Chairman, last time we had a hearing to deal with PROMESA. That should be a priority if we're going to continue. In order for us to move forward on any issue regarding Puerto Rico, we need to see more growth from the government. The terms of PROMESA need to be met. Puerto Rico, the bonds need to be rated by major credit rating agencies. I believe this committee has done Puerto Rico a great disservice by passing legislation right here without even holding additional hearings on PROMESA itself. And therefore, Chairman, I call on this committee to be responsible in that regard. And let's have hearings on the status of PROMESA. Let's quit playing games with this and move forward with it. And with that, sir, I'll yield back.
Yields, and before I recognize the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Velasquez.
Mr. Chairman, that was not a question, obviously, but.
No, and the time is up. Let me do my part. Okay,
because
thank you,
at
Governor.
some point, I would like to just make a brief reply. if you
Well,
may.
well, when somebody asks you a question, you can use that
Okay,
time.
no, well, I will be respectful to whoever asks me a question, but that's fine.
Not on
I
my
understand.
time. Not on my time.
Let me enjoy the prerogative of the chair for a little longer, please, sir, Mr. Governor. Let me just, short comment. The citizens, American citizens of Puerto Rico did not come to us after these disasters with their hands out. They came the same way that the people that suffered disasters in Florida and in Texas came to us for relief. And this reconstruction is tied to that relief. This is not, this is not a situation of charity. This is a situation of mutual support for American citizens across the board, regardless. And with that, let me Recognize gentlelady from New York, Ms. Velasquez.
Thank you,
5
Mr.
minutes.
Chairman and Ranking Member for holding this meeting. Governor, welcome.
Thank you.
And we are talking about disaster relief and the hurricanes. Because of Fiona, because of Maria, Irma, and Fiona, you have federal monies available to pay for capital costs for the reconstruction of the electrical grid. What are you doing to ensure that the federal money will be used to help the people of Puerto Rico as quickly as possible and not allow in any way a windfall for bondholders' recoveries that will ultimately benefit vulture funds?
Okay, your question has two components. In terms of what we're doing to expedite this, the moment I came into office and the Biden administration came into office, we started removing bureaucratic obstacles there were in
No.
both FEMA
Yeah.
and HUD. Marsha Fudge and Deanne Criswell, I tell you,
Yeah.
and this is a new day. And FEMA is allowing us to get 50% advances for the construction project, so that's going to help. Another thing we're doing
No,
is
let's go to the not
So-
using the money, it will not
for
allow in any
bondholders.
way.
Well, the only, and this will allow me to talk about Promesa. Actually, we have already restructured the public debt of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. We have already restructured most of the public debt that was outstanding successfully. 80% reduction, debt reduction for the government of Puerto Rico. PREPA is still
Mhm.
pending. And the oversight board, along with the government of Puerto Rico, we're doing the best to reach a consensual agreement. The board needs to submit a plan of adjustment, proposed plan of adjustment on December 1st to the federal court.
Okay, so
and
allow
so-
me,
Uh-huh.
Governor, I have a question about
Okay.
PREPA. So I want to
But take
frame the.
Take my word that I am not going to support any restructuring that is not sustainable, that is not affordable. That's the track record I have so far. So I wouldn't worry about
you're telling
bondholders getting
me-
a windfall.
You're telling me that that you're going to fully litigate all pending matters regarding PREPA before you agree to a settlement that will burden the people of Puerto Rico with unaffordable electricity and a detrimental deal that will further increase costs
It depends
and
on
only benefit vulture funds.
my answer. Has to be that it'll depend on the nature and extent of the settlement. Because actually there were outstanding claims before we got the 80% reduction in the Commonwealth's debt that were settled. So I cannot rule out that there will be settlement negotiations along the road, but I take my word that I'm not gonna allow PREPA to end up with a debt burden that is gonna end up causing extraordinary increases, unacceptable increases in the cost of electricity in Puerto Rico. It's got to be affordable. It's got
So
to be
what you're
sustainable.
telling me is that you will not support a deal that will bind the people of Puerto Rico with a bad deal for
Exactly.
the next 30, 40, 50 years.
Yes,
Okay. Because Puerto Ricans cannot afford it.
agree.
So, Governor, are you going to move forward with a 15-year contract regarding Luma that does not include financial penalties for poor performance or strong and independent oversight?
Actually, the 15-year contract provides for either penalties or bonus payments
Mhm.
depending on Luma's performance. The Energy Bureau will be publishing the metrics that will apply to Luma's performance once the 15-year contract is in place. And actually, when that 15-year contract is in place, the fee that Luma gets is considerably less than what we're paying Luma right now, the way
So-
this works. Now, December 1st. On December 1st, as I said before, I see two acceptable options. Either Luma starts rendering services under the 15-year contract with the new payment methodology set forth in the same, or Luma agrees to continue rendering services under the supplemental agreement until the bankruptcy process ends. Those are the two options that I would accept. I don't want to even think about the third option, which would be to cancel the Luma contract and get Luma on a transition out of Puerto Rico.
Okay, and what is your government
The
commitment?
time is, if I may, the time is over,
Okay.
and we can circle around
I
again.
yield back.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Ms. Radwagams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding this important hearing. I simply would like to yield all of my time to Congresswoman Gonzalez. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The chair recognizes Representative Gonzalez Colon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Congresswoman Amata Radiguagan for yielding the time. It's sorry that Mr. Hayes just left. I think it's necessary to make clear some issues here. First, he is entitled to his opinion regarding the status of the island, but he does not live in Puerto Rico. No, he does not represent the island as well. Nobody from the island voted for him to make those such questions. The only ones elected to do that job is the governor of Puerto Rico, who's sitting right there, and me. He's a Democrat, I'm a Republican, and both of us are respecting the will of the people of Puerto Rico that voted, not once, not twice, many times, rejecting the current territorial status. So what we are supporting here is what the people of the island voted for, and that's statehood. And that's democracy, right? So again, everybody can have, their own opinion, but coming here to this committee and saying many things about the island, and the main issue for our problems, financial problems, is the status. And that's the root of the problem. We couldn't be needing promesa or any economic other situation if we are not treated as equal American citizens under the law. And it's right. The U.S. Congress can do whatever they want with territories. They can do whatever they want with the issue of Puerto Rico. And yet, we're still facing a lot of the needs, like states of Louisiana, New Jersey, Florida, Texas, that were hit by hurricanes as well. So why treating Puerto Rico differently than the way you treat other states when they are in times of need? So I'm sorry that I'm bringing that issue, but I cannot be silent when somebody is entitled to their opinion, but not respecting the will of the people of Puerto Rico. Having said that, I think it's important that one of the issues, Governor, that we're discussing here is that there are many hurdles for the island to manage federal funding because we are a territory. And you were saying a few minutes ago that you were asking regarding to the barges in FEMA, you were requesting power barges and high capacity portable generators. How long those generators are going to be on the island?
Yes, the FEMA regional coordinator for the Fiona disaster anticipates that the barges could be contracted for within a month or 2 or 3 months, that time
For
frame.
having them, but how long?
For having them, because obviously FEMA would have to lease those.
Of course, and how long they're going to be there once they are on the island?
They would remain in Puerto Rico for at most a year. It could be a bit more, because the purpose of having this additional generation is to give stability to the system while we continue with the transformation, while we continue rebuilding the grid, improving the plants, and repairing the plants in due course, giving them the required maintenance, right? That's why we need additional generation. Now, let me say something, Resident Commissioner.
Question, just to finish that question.
Okay.
How much does the installment of these barges will reduce blackouts and brownouts?
It should help incredibly, because we're talking about 600 to 700 megawatts of additional generation capacity. That's what's going to happen by getting the barges as well as portable generators. At the Corps of Engineers has portable generators, but they can also lease or contract for additional portable generators. FEMA estimates that they will need 7 of those portable generators altogether, 3 barges, 7 generators. We should be having like 600 to 700 megawatt additional capacity. That's a game changer. That's going to allow us to then repair, continue repairing, continue improving the existing generation plants, as well as improving the grid. Because it is, we need to keep in mind that what we need is stable power while we transform our energy system.
Thank you. And just to clear the record, this committee did not pass HR 1522. We passed 8393. There was a consensus bill that got many hearings throughout the years. So with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back, and the chair associates himself with the resident commissioner's remarks. The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and buenos dias. Thank you, Governor, for coming and joining us here. You know, I'm heartbroken about the difficulties that you're experiencing in Puerto Rico and what the people have endured with the disasters and the pain of the aftermath. And, you know, I think a real point that you've made in your testimony and that I've suffered and you know, my communities in New Mexico is we can appropriate the funds, the president can sign bills into law, but when the funds don't actually make it to help reduce and resolve the problems on the ground, then we have not finished our job. And we need to keep raising these issues and exploring that. So would you share a bit more about what have been the barriers to actually getting the funds that have already been obligated dispersed on the ground?
Well, both Manuel Lavoy and William Rodriguez will be able to expand because they're in charge of actually the CDBG, DR, and MID funds in Puerto Rico and the FEMA funds. But let me just give you the long story short. FEMA, it took FEMA up to 2020 and Maria happened in 2017 to actually give us access to the funds, most of the funds. And also, for a couple of years, FEMA was the one handling the disbursements. It wasn't Puerto Rico. Finally, like in 2019, if I'm correct, if not, I'll be corrected later, FEMA allowed Puerto Rico to handle the disbursement, but then it told Puerto Rico, we need to audit you before you actually can disburse. So it was like a pre-disbursement audit. Made no sense. When Deanne Criswell came into her office, it took her just a couple months till about May of 2021 to remove that altogether, allow us to handle the procurement, the disbursements process, comply with compliance requirements, and that changed the landscape for us. This is since about a year, a bit more than a year ago. That's why you see from then on a significant increase in disbursements. In the case of CDBG, DR, something similar happened. There was a grant agreement imposing quite a lot of restrictions on us. And when Secretary Fudge assumed office, it took her a couple months till April of 2021 to remove that grant agreement, or at least the strict requirements in it.
So
since then, you see an uptick that is undeniable in our use of CDBG-DR funds. So that's
what you've just described to me, Governor, is really basically part of the issues, I think, with FEMA, and we need to look at it as a Congress, there are statutory constraints, and we are going to be dealing with many more disasters, and we're going to need to, as a Congress, address the limitations of FEMA to deal with these disasters and the pain and the loss, because what the Stafford Act right now cannot do what the communities need. That's very clear, but that administratively big changes can be made in terms of removing the bureaucracy and having things move quicker. So I think that those two are, it's not necessarily the the jurisdiction of this committee, but that we need to look at. Another area, and so, I'd love and I would ask that you supplement your answer with those who are behind you with expertise, and then also writing as a supplemental answer from your experience, because you are dealing with it on the ground. We are dealing with it on the ground with the opposite. You are dealing with water. We are dealing with fire. FEMA does not know how to deal with fire. It is used to dealing with water. But what we're suffering in the Southwest is going to be fires, right? And we need FEMA to be able to do that. But what I'd love for you to ask in submission, tell us from the ground, this is what we think the Stafford Act should be modified from our experience on the ground. And so I would appreciate if you would do that.
Count on it.
I'm also run out of time, but I also am very concerned about the inequities that we are going to see if we don't modify when we deal with the Farm Bill with regards to the nutrition programs and those kinds of things. I do sit on some relevant committees and would also think that that is going to be important to address, because that's a problem. I'll give you.
We would like to be included in the SNAP program, and we're requesting that. It's only fair that we get the same nutrition assistance as our fellow American citizens in the States.
Yeah, every citizen should be treated
Yes.
the same.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the resident commissioner, Jennifer Gonzalez-Colon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing us. Governor, we were talking about the situations between FEMA, PREPA, and many people of the island that are following this hearing are always complaining that every week we do have a lot of blackouts. And I experienced those myself. So I want to know how the fiscal restructuring draft plan for PREPA was rejected early this year, and currently is being reworked. And the Financial Oversight Management Board has recently indicated that the increased number of customers who intend to go off the grid is going to impact the cash flow of PREPA. And the cash that they have available to pay any settlement. And the public opinion is strongly against the idea of seeing their future utility bills include not only paying for actual service, but a charge to pay the settlement regardless of what they consume. My question will be, in your view, how does this pending completion of the fiscal restructuring plan affect the recovery process of the island in the long term, and if that will prevent PREPA from investing in their infrastructure?
Having a plan of adjustment confirmed by the federal court is absolutely essential, because it would stabilize the PREPA's finances and it would make it a better counterparty to any entity that deals with PREPA. Now, you mentioned the loss of revenue for PREPA if we turn to renewable energy sources like we are committed to because of our energy public energy policy law. I am not concerned about that, and let me explain why. On the one hand, people who have solar power will reduce the cost of energy for themselves, and they'll be paying less to PREPA through the metering system we have, no question about it. On the other hand, though, people using electric vehicles will be consuming more power from a PREPA because instead of spending in fuel, they'll be spending in just electricity. And by the way, the Department of the Federal Highway Authority just approved a plan for stationing electric vehicle charges on all the major highways in Puerto Rico. So, in addition, the way that this is envisioned is that we will be shutting off traditional generation plants as renewable energy comes into the system. And we have 18 projects right now already approved by the Energy Bureau and the government of Puerto Rico to add roughly 1,850 megawatts of capacity to our system from solar power. with 200 battery storage, 200 megawatt battery storage. We also have, we'll be having another 1,000 megawatts in additional energy, renewable energy projects. This is going to be an RFP that is coming out. And what's going to happen once we keep adding renewable energy production in Puerto Rico, generation in Puerto Rico, we'll be shutting off the plants of PREPA, and that's going to generate savings for PREPA. So this cannot be viewed as losing revenue from customers and then having be in a precarious financial condition. You will not if you generate the savings related to this transformation that is ongoing. There shouldn't be any financial issue for PREPA, and the debt needs to be the lower the better.
Thank you.
And that's what I'll be keeping an eye on in terms of the plan of adjustment.
Thank you. A year and a half ago, Luma took control of the transmission and distribution system on the island. What you're doing to ensure Luma improve its service and the performance metric?
Luma there's oversight on Luma from so many quarters. I personally do oversight. My chief of staff does oversight. I have an assistant chief of staff full-time on energy affairs doing it as well. Then we have the P3 authority, which is the administrator of the contract, doing oversight as required by the contract. We have the legislature doing oversight. We have mayors doing oversight. If anything, there's oversight all over the place. Now,
Thank you.
So, and what we're doing is ensuring
Governor.
that Luma improves its service and reduces the duration of the disruptions that we're still facing.
Yield back.
Thank you. Mr. San Nicolas, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Are you receiving me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, the people of Guam have always stood in solidarity with the people of Puerto Rico. Gobernador Pierluisi, you mentioned several segments back a desire for additional time to remark on some comments made that were directed particularly toward statehood in Puerto Rico, as well as the financial condition of Puerto Rico. I'd like to afford you 3 minutes of my time, and if Ms. Velasquez is still present, I'd afford the final minute to her, and if not, I'll yield the full balance of my time to Gobernador Pierluisi.
I thank you so much for your courtesy. I'll be brief. Part of the comments I heard deal with the procedures that were followed in this committee while I wasn't a member of the committee, so I'm not in a position to comment on that. Our resident commissioner already commented on that, and I know others could as well. But I have to reply to a couple of statements that were made. The first thing that I'll say is that most, if not all, territories that have become states were underperforming the states financially and economically. And one of the reasons why they aspired to become states was to do better, for starters. Secondly, all of them didn't have the vote for the president and the vice president, didn't have voting representation in Congress. So they were aspiring to become states because they wanted to have full democracy. To think that you can put that aside just because you're facing a public debt issue or facing a recession in Puerto Rico misses the point altogether. The second thing that I'll say is that there has been a lot of progress in terms of the public finances of Puerto Rico. 2 budgets, including this one, are clearly balanced as certified by the oversight board we have, including the payment of debt. The debt of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico has already been restructured, as well as the principal government entities in Puerto Rico. We just had 2 fiscal years with economic growth. 2021, 1% growth coming after a 3% reduction in our GNP. 2022-23, 4% growth. And this one is on the same track. Tourism is booming. Manufacturing is increasing consistently. We have the lowest unemployment rate in our history. Labor participation has increased by 5%. we have right now more people employed in Puerto Rico than ever since 2009, when Puerto Rico had 500,000 more people living in Puerto Rico. The statistics are there. If anything, what we're proving is the successful management of the government of Puerto Rico and its economy. And this is not only the credit of my administration, the people of Puerto Rico and our economic sectors deserve the credit as well. Having said that, we do not get the same deal in key federal programs like Medicaid, Medicare, SSI, and SNAP. No question that would help us economically, financially, which would be something else that Congress could do to assist the American citizens of Puerto Rico. And we're not coming here to ask for special treatment. We're coming here to be treated the same as our fellow American citizens. We were treated the same in terms of the COVID response, the pandemic response. And what ended up happening is that Puerto Rico was on the top in terms of vaccination. We proved that when you treat us equally, we can do as well or better than anybody in the States. And so that's why you always see us saying, remember that we're American citizens, proud American citizens, and that we simply want full democracy and a fair deal. For the first time, Mr. Chairman, there's still time running on my clock.
With that, Mr. Chairman, if no further comment, unless Mr. Soto would like the remaining time.
I thank the gentleman from Guam. Governor, it's great to see you speak so passionately about something that we all feel very strongly about. We had 2 historic 4 or 5 hour hearings on the status of Puerto Rico, followed by a historic compromise on allowing for statehood, both of our preferences, along with options for independence to decolonize Puerto Rico. And we are working to the last minute to ensure we could get a floor vote on that very legislation. So I thank you for your leadership and for the leadership of the resident commissioner, Jennifer Gonzalez-Colon, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields, and Mr. Obernolte, you're recognized, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, I've been enjoying your testimony. I'd like to continue a line of questioning that Mr. Gallego started concerning your request for the allocation of $5 billion in directed CDBG-DR funding for residential solar. Can you talk a little bit about how that money would be used to enhance Puerto Rico's energy resiliency?
Yes, first of all, this was the chairman's request along with several members of Congress, and I support it. As I told you, when I add up what we're doing in terms of promoting solar energy systems in Puerto Rico, incentivizing distributed energy and microgrid, when you add it all up, I am using, because it is my call, roughly $2.2 billion of CDBG-DR and CDBG-MIT funding for that purpose, which is CDBG-DR funding is being used to install solar panels on all homes rebuilt in Puerto Rico, newly constructed because of damage suffered by Maria, caused by Maria. I am using, actually I left this out, ARPA funding. I used ARPA funding to provide incentives, assistance to small and medium businesses in Puerto Rico so that they can install solar panels and battery systems in their facilities. We're using $1.3 billion of CDBG-DR funding for microgrids, distributed energy systems, and in remote areas in Puerto Rico and critical public facilities.
If we could, let's tunnel down on that, because this is where my concern lies. So the CDBG-DR action plan for Puerto Rico energy systems.
Yes.
The plan is to create 159 microgrids within the island to increase the resiliency of the energy infrastructure. But residential solar, to increase resiliency, would have to have a much finer array of microgrids, because 159, I mean, obviously, those are still large areas. So
Okay.
I'm asking about
I'll
how this is going to increase resiliency, because I'm concerned that just
Yeah.
putting solar panels on a residence, if you're still depending on that connection to the utility, to PREPA, it's not going to increase resiliency. So I'm wondering what the plan is.
Well, okay, let me just say this. Luma has provided for the interconnection of 33,000 new solar systems in Puerto Rico. And they're interconnected. And there's technology these days that actually, depending on who's the installer of the system and who owns the system, you can have like virtual power being generated in Puerto Rico and added to the system in a systematic way. Put that aside. That's
Sure,
Luma.
that's good, but
Okay.
it does not increase resiliency.
I
Okay.
believe it increased resiliency in the sense that you're making these households more self-sufficient.
Okay.
If they have battery systems, they can go through
Uh-huh.
a natural disaster without losing power if they handle their systems adequately. But let me say more. I am devoting, it's my call, $500 million of CDBG mid funding to provide basically solar systems with batteries to roughly 25,000 low-income households. Why am I supporting the $5 billion proposal of Chairman Grijalva and others in Congress for more solar systems? Because do a quick math. If we're reaching 25,000 households with $500 million worth of CDBG mid funding, if we get earmarked funding at the tune of $5 billion, you extrapolate it, it's 10 times more. So then you're talking about 250,000 households.
Yeah. Okay.
And-
So
and
before,
so-
let me reclaim my time just before.
Okay, I'm
about to run
sorry.
out of time here. Let me just ask you, please make sure that when you create the action plan for that funding, if you get it, that you create enough microgrids to make it so that it also increases resiliency, because that's the purpose of DR funding, right? It's supposed to increase resiliency. There are other pools of money for residential solar.
Your point is well taken, and I know part of what Luma is doing is making sure that all these systems can be interdependent. They can, instead of relying on the grid, they can be on their own. One thing we're doing with industrial scale renewable
I
energy.
yield back, Mr. Chair.
Appreciate it, sir. To be clear on the proposal, for solar and batteries, it's the issue of batteries where the resiliency comes from primarily, and that's an essential part of the proposal. Let me now turn to Mr. Tonko. Sir, you have 5 minutes, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Ranking Member, for holding this hearing. And Mr. Governor, thank you for joining us today. It was an honor to serve with you, and it's great to see you. It is so important that everyone has access to clean, affordable, and reliable electricity to power our homes, our businesses, emergency medical centers, water treatment plants, and so many other critical facilities. But natural disasters continue to severely damage Puerto Rico's centralized electric grid, causing extended outages for the entire island. So, Mr. Governor, what are some of the economic impacts of an extended island-wide outage for people and businesses in Puerto Rico?
Well, there's no question that when you have a power outage, it has an impact on businesses in Puerto Rico. As I said before, it took about 2 weeks to restore 75% of our power after Fiona. So for 2 weeks, I am sure that a lot of businesses were not operating. We saw in the month of September a downward movement in our GNP, and that's not surprising in our economic index activity report or activity indexes. And that's not surprising. But the way these federal emergency management programs work is that they provide individual assistance. So by the month of October, already FEMA had disbursed over $600 million, which to individuals, SBA was assisting businesses. And so the economy, I have no question, I have no doubt that in the month of October, it's recovering, and then we will continue our course. So the combination of a quicker response or recovery from the blackout and the FEMA's assistance will ensure that this is not going to be like Maria. Maria, it took Puerto Rico back then, it took the PREPA back then, and it took FEMA back then 11 months to restore 100% of the power of the island. This is night and day. And one thing, Mr. Tonko, that I didn't mention, I wanted to mention it because it is important. We do have industrial scale renewable energy projects ongoing as we speak. But what we're considering doing is when you have a solar farm, let's make a grid in that area. Let's have that solar farm provide the power for the households and businesses in that area. And right now, I mentioned there are 18 of those projects ongoing, and it'll continue increasing. There are many things we can be doing. And by the way, the amount of private investment in those 18 projects that I'm talking about is about $1 billion. So it's not a small amount. So there are lots of things ongoing at the moment. Some of it is using FEMA funding, using CDBG, DR, and MID funding, but some of it is actually incentivizing the private sector to come in and add renewable energy to Puerto Rico with the goal of producing 40% of our energy from renewable sources by 2025, the immediate goal. By the way this is working, I am confident that we could reach that goal by 2025. Because there are a lot of projects in the pipeline. And if this $5 billion earmark happens, you have to add it all. You need to add solar power generation at households, businesses. You need to add, my people will give you the statistics later on. And we need to add what this industrial scale renewable projects will be generating and add it all and hopefully reach the renewable energy portfolio standard that we have set in our law.
Okay, thank you, Governor. And I'm thrilled that the Department of Energy recently awarded funding to General Electric in my district to develop and demonstrate a new microgrid technology in Puerto Rico. It would automate the process of leveraging power from one microgrid to restore power to a nearby microgrid, perhaps one serving a hospital or critically underserved community. This project will be researched and worked on in my district in New York's capital region, creating local jobs and innovation, and demonstrated in Puerto Rico. It shows that modernizing Puerto Rico's grid is essential for ensuring the health and safety of our fellow Americans on the island. It also has mutual benefits for communities all over the U.S. So I look forward to seeing this and similar projects advance to help bring about a clean and just future for all of Puerto Rico.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Conway? Mr. Benz, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Governor, I wouldn't want your job. Just saying. So under your debt restructuring, the debt was written down in January from 34 billion to 7.4 billion, a portion of it. And then the Office of Management Budget created a plan that Puerto Rico is supposed to be following. I'm familiar with these plans. I'm a lawyer. I've helped structure debt repayment programs for many, many different clients. And consistent performance under the plan is essential if the plan's going to work.
You're referring to the plan of adjustment?
I'm sorry?
Are you referring to the plan of adjustment that was confirmed by the federal court?
Yes.
Okay.
And is reducing the value of all COFINA bonds by $6 billion and the debt service payments by 32%. In January, a federal judge confirmed a plan of adjustment for general obligation bonds, reducing the central government's debt from 34 billion to 7.4 billion. That's what I'm referring to.
Okay.
And so, and then as a condition of such reduction, there was a plan, a certified fiscal plan for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. What I'm concerned about is the report that was issued in the FOMB's 2022 annual report, where the board noted that the Puerto Rican government has struggled, quote, struggled with the implementing reforms and reporting on this implementation in a timely manner, causing progress to be inconsistent and incomplete, with many reforms either delayed or not occurring. And it goes on to talk about we could talk about the implications this has when it comes to trying to obtain money from FEMA, which the structure you referred to a couple of times, where the money is actually given out first and then reporting follows. And I also have here a report of FEMA did not effectively manage disaster case management program funds in Hurricane Maria recovery services. What they found fault, the Office of Inspector General found fault with how FEMA operated. I've had occasion to work with FEMA because the state of Oregon, which I'm from, suffered dramatic fire loss several years ago. The way that we finally made it work with FEMA, and I say finally, that's not the right word. They worked rapidly to help, but we had systems in place in the state of Oregon, local systems, county systems, all kinds of systems that are set up to appropriately respond. And as I read this report, that does not appear to be the case in Puerto Rico. And I say that without knowing. I'm just drawing some conclusions from these reports. But what I really would like you to address is the FOMB's 2022 annual report, where it says that the Puerto Rican government has struggled with implementing reforms and reporting on this implementation in a timely manner, causing progress to be inconsistent and incomplete. Why does that report say that? And can you explain why? I don't want an excuse. I want you to call out the cause of the delay.
Well, actually, the first thing that I'll say is that some of those reforms that the fiscal plan provides for require legislation. And but the oversight board doesn't have the power under PROMESA to impose legislation. So the fiscal plan, to the extent it requires legislation, it depends on the will of the legislature for that to happen or not. So that's the first question I'll say. Some of the reforms call for administrative action. There has been undeniable progress in complying with board requirements. The transparency that you see in Puerto Rico, you have never seen before. 3 financial statements, audited financial statements, have been published since the beginning of my tenure, and we will be up to date by May of next year. All our financial statements, audited financial statements, will be published. That's an incredible progress for Puerto Rico. The board complained about legislation that recently was approved in Puerto Rico, providing a specific vacation leave for private sector employees, as well as some other rights to our labor force, which actually we had before there was a reform several years ago. The board complained, went to court. That case is pending. I suspect some of the board's complaints relate to that particular legislation. But in terms of my administration's dealings with the board, we have an effective relationship. We don't agree always, and there are disagreements, but there has been an improvement.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. I yield.
I'll recognize gentleman from Chicago, Mr. Garcia. You recognize, sir. Let me add, before the representative uses his time, we have votes are going to be called. There's also an announcement that my side of the aisle will be at, and that involves the speaker. And so at some point soon, maybe in 20 minutes or half an hour, I'm going to call a recess so that we can attend to those 2 things, the speaker's announcement and the votes that have been called on the floor. This hearing isn't going fast, nor should it. So we'll be back and we'll continue with, at that point, with whatever is left. But right now, Mr. Garcia, sir, you're recognized.
Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this critically important hearing to address the political, economic, and structural neglect that Puerto Rico faces as it tries to rebuild. It's been 5 years since Hurricanes Irma and Maria devastated Puerto Rico, Culebra, and Vieques. And during the reconstruction that followed, many projects were poorly managed, funding has been insufficient, and even available funds have not been dispersed. Then this past September, of course, Puerto Rico experienced another devastating storm, Hurricane Fiona. So it's especially important for us to look frankly at the slow under-resourced reconstruction of the last 5 years. We've got to apply those lessons now. We've got to build a sustainable, resilient power grid that is responsive to consumer needs. And of course, we need to prioritize consultation with community members and civil society. With that in mind, I'd like to ask my first question to Governor Pierluisi. Buenos dias, Governor. Governor Pierluisi, good morning. In 2011, you created the Concilio de Reconstrucción by executive order. This reconstruction council was supposed to help the recommendation, consultation, and permits for rebuilding move in an efficient manner. According to its webpage, the council published 2 comprehensive reports in 2021. So let me first ask, what is the composition of the council, sir?
I cannot tell you from the top of my head, but I understand that what you have there is representation from the home builders, the Builders Association, the AGC, Associated General Contractors. You have the College of Engineers, College of Architects. You have mostly all the entities that deal with the construction industry in Puerto Rico, and they advise us regularly through that council. I also created a reconstruction government committee that is currently chaired by my chief of staff that meets regularly, could be weekly, bi-weekly, to follow up on all reconstruction projects. So it is a massive undertaking, but definitely there has been a change, significant change in the speed of the disbursements since the Biden administration came into office and my administration came into office. That is undeniable.
Well, thank you for that. Now, this council, of course, seems like a significant opportunity to involve local leaders and civil society groups in the rebuilding process. The community consultation is essential for developing solutions that actually help the communities that they are meant to serve. What efforts have been made to continue this work and/or to include municipalities or civil community groups or civil society participation?
Well, I know, and our Secretary of Housing could expand that we're using a considerable amount of CDBG-DR funding for planning purposes, and that NGOs are assisting us for planning purposes, and he could talk about that. In terms of municipalities, we're going out of our way to provide funding to municipalities. Actually, the proposal that we gave to FEMA to give us a 25% advance of the cost of reconstruction projects initially was intended to assist municipalities. 75% of the reconstruction projects in Puerto Rico with FEMA funding come from municipalities, but they were not happening, the permanent projects, because the municipalities didn't have the cash flow to start the projects. You have to understand that FEMA works based on reimbursements. And so the municipalities didn't have the cash flow to hire engineers, architects, to handle the design and the permitting of the projects, and they were not getting off the ground. We convinced FEMA to give them the 25% advance, and it has been a total success. Now FEMA has allowed us to expand that to agencies and NGOs, and that's making a difference. And again, both my Secretary of Housing and the head of the Core 3 agency in Puerto Rico could expand when they take their turn on the next panel.
Okay, thank you for that. We look forward to hearing from them. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you.
Sir, Ms. Chair Ledger Fernandez, if you're recognized, if you're prepared to ask questions. Okay. No, Mr. Torres, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me the opportunity to ask questions, and thank you, Governor, for your public service.
Thank you.
Puerto Rico's electric grid is so fragile that every natural disaster seems to cause widespread power outages. And it seems to me the Achilles heel of Puerto Rico's electric grid is the lack of redundancy. And so what progress are you making toward rebuilding the grid with greater resiliency and with more distributed energy?
Well, first, let me say that we need an adequate reserve in terms of our generation capacity, which we don't have at the moment because of plants failing or in need of repair. That's why what FEMA is doing now, giving us assistance to increase our power generation for a specific period of time. It's like giving us breathing room while we keep rebuilding the system, improving the system, makes all the sense in the world. In terms of adding renewable energy projects, we're going at it expeditiously, actually. We already have about 1,000 megawatt additional generation capacity from renewable projects in the design and some in the construction stage with battery support, 200 megawatt in battery support. We also have an RFP process, which is about to be launched for an additional 1,000 megawatt generation capacity from renewable, from solar sources, along with 500 megawatts in battery storage. This is industrial scale projects, but we're also submitting or issuing an RFP process in January to use $1.3 billion that we destined for microgrids, distributed energy initiatives in remote communities, in critical facilities. And the first one that we'll have, actually, it's a microgrid that will handle our Centro Médico, our medical center in Atorrey, the only trauma center we have in Puerto Rico. So we'll continue doing that. But having FEMA's support, both on a short-term basis as well as this up to 50% advance of funding, is going to make the difference.
Now, I had heard, and maybe I have a misunderstanding, that there were issues with the advance payments, that the advance payments were based on fixed cost estimates, and that Puerto Rico would have to pay the gap between the fixed cost estimates and advance payments.
That's a different issue, which we're
Okay.
dealing with. It's one of my asks to this committee. Yes, we are using Section 428 of the Stafford Act. The way that section works is FEMA agrees with the recipient, with Puerto Rico, and sub-recipient as to the estimate of the cost of the project and locks it in. And so you need to live with that estimate.
Even if those estimates have been rendered obsolete by inflation.
Exactly. That's why we're calling for Congress to authorize FEMA to adjust those fixed cost estimates due to the increase in the cost of construction materials and supply chain disruption.
So it's fair to say that neither FEMA's existing reimbursement program nor FEMA's advanced payment programs are sufficiently mindful of the unique fiscal needs in Puerto Rico.
We still need to improve them. It's the answer that I can give you. And one pending item is this flexibility that FEMA should have in adjusting fixed cost estimates that have been agreed to a couple of years ago. And a couple of years ago, or 2 years ago, when the inflation was not what we're facing right now, when didn't have the disruption in supply chains we've been facing since the pandemic. And that's why I have this ask for this committee.
I want to quickly ask you, when I took a tour of Puerto Rico with you, I noticed that most of the housing I saw was informally constructed. And so I'm wondering, how do we avoid repairing these homes in the same fragile form? Does FEMA provide you with the flexibility you need to rebuild these homes with greater resilience?
Well, one thing FEMA is doing is actually funding a public affairs campaign, public education campaign, encouraging people to build up to code, to comply with our construction code and permitting system.
Is there enough funding to that effect, or?
We got a decent amount of funding to do that, but that's a public education issue. 50%, at least 50% of our households are not code compliant, which is to your point. And FEMA is trying to be flexible in providing assistance to the owners of those households.
Let me ask one general question, if I may, Governor, and thank you for being with us. Much appreciated. And
thank you.
The plan to expand, repair, remodel the schools over, one of the things I found striking in visiting Puerto Rico this year, as I did, there are many schools that have not been rebuilt or repaired since they were damaged back in Maria, 2017. Is there a lack of progress, or what do you see for that?
Well,
500 schools.
There has been a lot of progress in fixing structural issues in our schools. We had some earthquakes, as you may recall, in early 2020. And one school totally collapsed because of the design of its structural columns, defective design. So we have fixed, using FEMA funding, up to, it's close to 600 schools already that had those structural issues. We have $2.2 billion of FEMA funding to either repair or rebuild schools or build new schools. And that is an ongoing project. The working capital advance is assisting us. The Department of Education just requested, if my recollection serves me right, a bit more than $40 million in the form of a working capital advance, which will help it launch, hire, again, engineers, architects, for the design and permitting of the schools we need to work on.
Okay.
So that's an ongoing project.
Let me ask you one other question, Governor, and a pathway, a timeline to where it's not just a particular interest of mine. It's something that I heard over and over in Puerto Rico about their schools and their safety and their availability. So, I think that would be of interest to
I
the
can
committee.
supplement my testimony by giving you a
I
status
appreciate
report on the Department
what I
of
was-
Education infrastructure projects.
That's what I was getting at. Luma, renegotiations, looking at the contract. And one of the things that is noticeable, perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the benchmarks that are set are that have to be attained by the private contractor, for additional money, that's the target. Those are the benchmarks. One of the things that's, to me, is glaring is that there's no consequences for not meeting certain benchmarks.
No, there are consequences.
In the contracts as it exists?
Well, what's happening is this. The 15-year contract provides a payment methodology that includes either bonuses or penalties, depending on compliance with the metrics that the Energy Bureau will be setting. The current supplemental agreement does not. And the reason is because we have this bankruptcy process ongoing. Because of the uncertainty involved in having a bankruptcy process for PREPA, the parties agreed, meaning the P3 authority, PREPA, and Luma, agreed to enter into this supplemental agreement that simply provides Luma a fixed fee for its services, and the Energy Bureau, along with the P3 authority, monitor Luma's performance and periodically report, the Energy Bureau does, how Luma is doing in terms of the metrics. And the metrics that so far, the Energy
that's
Bureau
our confusion.
Okay.
That's our confusion, Governor, and I think we need to clarify that, because, you know, the opportunity to make some corrections, although many people cry for the end of Luma as the provider, and those voices are not only on the island, they're also here in Congress. It's providing that information where our reading of it, or at least the staff and my reading of it, the downside was that there was no consequence. And if
No,
we're
there
wrong,
is.
well, if we're wrong, if you could provide it, because, you know, that then we won't keep repeating that.
Luma is represented at this hearing, so you can ask them directly. I am sure that we can also supplement my testimony to give you the
Appreciate it.
specifics in terms of the requirements on Luma and the way that we're overseeing Luma.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for your testimony. And we're going to call a recess so that those of us that are interested in hearing from the speaker will do so, and then take the votes, and then come back and begin with the second panel. I apologize for the delay, but that was inevitable given the structure of the day and all the stuff that's before us. But Governor, again, thank you for your time. And
I thank the attendance of so many members of this committee. That also has to do with the time that it has taken. I appreciate that. There has been a lot of interest in this topic, and I really appreciate on behalf of the people of Puerto Rico.
And to your credit and my credit, we kind of kept on time. Appreciate it.